Next Generation Biosecurity, Protecting the Future of Swine Health. We have a friend back on the program today, Dr. Scott D. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks, Jim. Great to see you again and great to be on your show. Thanks for making time for me.
Well, it's been a lot of work for you, Scott. We last talked in January. We're doing a follow-up today on Next Generation Biosecurity and the 3 years of work that you've completed. Well, let's backtrack quickly. What does next generation biosecurity entail? How does it differ from traditional biosecurity measures?
Yeah, that's a great way to start. So historically, I've been working on biosecurity almost my whole career. Transmission and biosecurity kind of go hand in hand. You learn how the virus or the pathogen moves, and then you figure out a way to stop it. And historically, with biosecurity protocols, you never really had a lot of science-based justification for their efficacy. It was more of an idea or, just a product that somebody was trying to sell. And it really hadn't been tested at the level it needs to be tested. So biosecurity never got to the level of, I think, what we call evidence-based practice, which means you take scientifically validated information and you put it into a program, in the case of biosecurity program. And so everything that you recommend doing for the farmer has been proven to be efficacious in a controlled experiment. And that's really the kind of the crux of the next generation. It's a new way of thinking. We need to be evidence-based overall, and we need to take everything we're going to apply and be sure that there's data supporting that it works. That's very different than the past. So that's kind of why we've called it that, because it's obviously the next generation.
Well, this is still new, Scott. So with the current research paper, how does it stand apart or differ from the first?
Yeah, great question. So in both of those papers, one was in the JAB, this one's in animals. They really should be read together. This one we're talking about today is a follow-up to the first one. And the common thread between the two is both used the next generation protocol that was defined in both papers. And that program basically takes different routes of transmission. And I call it the four pillars. You've got your direct routes is one phase. That's your pigs and semen. So you need negative breeding stock and you need negative semen. Pillar two is what I call mechanical transmission. That's all the fomite-based ways that viruses can move around, transport, people, supplies, and you've got your protocols to neutralize those. And then there's aerosol transmission is pillar three, and feed transmission and mitigation is pillar four. So that's the common link between both papers. But what differs this paper from the previous one, basically this paper is unique because it provides the third year of looking at what the next generation did to the PRRS incidence risk, or the percentage of new farms getting infected with new strains on an annual basis across the pipestone system. So the first paper basically took the first 2 years and talked about how often do we get new viruses. This paper's taking year 3, but it also provides a cumulative assessment of across all 3 years. And then it also provides, were there any other benefits of doing this? Were there any production benefits? Which there were. So we looked at various KPIs in the breeding herd and looked at, did we see an improvement in performance based on level of biosecurity? So that's kind of what's unique from this paper versus the other one. So therefore, if the listeners haven't really studied the first paper, they should go back and look at that, and then look at this one in kind of in sequence.
Are there other significant findings from the recent studies and the current studies, and how do they advance our understanding of biosecurity, or in this case, next-gen biosecurity?
Yeah, so what was really interesting in the whole 3-year project was we found two groups of farms. We found farms that had the whole approach, all four pillars of the NGB. We called it NGB complete. But there was a small subset, about 25% of the farms across this 70s, I think it was 75 breeding herds and almost 400,000 sows. So it's a big study. There was a small subset of farms or cohort of farms that had all the pieces in place except they didn't have any air filtration. And we were able to look at those two cohorts and compare, was one better than the other? And what we clearly learned was that the NGB complete cohort had significantly lower PRRS incidence risk, so less infection. It worked better on preventing virus. And as you'd expect, there was a higher level of productivity in those herds that didn't get PRRS all the time. Common sense. But so the NGB complete group really outperformed the NGB incomplete group, showing the value of the entire program, not just on PRRS, but also on productivity. So that was a big take home across both papers. And a lot of that information on the productivity side is found in the new recent publication in Animals.
Nothing like this has been seen before, Scott.
I've been working with this, Jim, since 1988, and I've never seen a database that had the size, so the number of farms, the number of sows, it had the scale, the time, so a 3-year assessment. And it really never had the outcomes to show that we could clearly control PRRS. So the pipe cell system, and I give them a lot of credit because they're very generous in sharing all this data. They wouldn't have to do that, but they do it to help everybody because that helps them too. More biosecurity is good for everyone. So the system used to run at about a 50% incidence risk each year. So half the herds would get infected with new viruses. In the 3-year assessment across the new paper, we took that down below 10%. So it was 8% average across all 3 years, which I've single digit PRRS incidence risk I've never seen before over that size and scale and scope of a database. So it was quite powerful, in my opinion.
How can these findings impact the swine industry, particularly improving health outcomes and operational efficiency?
Yeah, to me, what it does is, let's go back to 2000. In 2000, when I left practice and went to the University of Minnesota, the state of PRRS was the breeding stock companies had eliminated virus from their pyramids, and PIC led the way, and I give them a lot of credit. So now the producers could buy PRRS negative gilts, they could buy PRRS negative semen for the first time in the history since the disease emerged. And so they could stock new farms with clean animals. But what happened after that quite quickly was what we call area spread. Area spread became a common event, meaning a new virus would get into these negative farms and they could sequence it and show that it wasn't the old one they cleaned up, it was a new one. So area spread was the big issue about 2000, 2001. And I took it on myself to develop a research program to look at various routes of transmission, what I'll call the indirect routes. We already knew about pigs and semen, the direct routes. The indirect routes to transport move the virus. What about people? What about supplies? What about air? What about feed? So we investigated all of those risk factors and we developed and tested a biosecurity protocol for each one. And we just took it step by step by step and came up with this database on here's how the virus moves and here's how you stop it. And that gave us a chance to then put it together in the NGB protocol and test it. So that's kind of the history behind where we started, why we did this, and where we got to before we started the 3-year assessment, if that makes sense.
Well, fascinating work, Scott. Now, beyond the direct biosecurity benefits, what other advantages do these insights offer to swine producers and the broader industry?
Well, they provide evidence that we can control the area spread of the virus. So you can clean up your herd, and in the old days, it was very difficult to prevent reinfection. Now you can eliminate virus, you can clean up your farm, and there's a much better chance they're going to stay free of a new virus coming in. That's a very different paradigm. And that was always the Achilles heel, I think, for PRRS control for 20 some years is, yeah, we can clean up that, we can eliminate the virus, but we're going to get it right back again from wherever, whatever route. Now we know how it moves around, and now we know how to stop it. And so it's a new paradigm. It's a completely new way of thinking. And to me, it gives producers a lot of confidence that if they're going to go to all the work and cost of trying to eliminate their current strain of the virus, if they follow the rules like we've laid out in these publications, there's a very good chance, not 100%, but you're below 10% likelihood of getting it back in again. So that, to me, if I was a producer, that'd be the evidence I would want to take to my lender to say I need this money to invest, or to talk to my vet about, hey, let's look at my farm. Where am I good? Where am I lacking in my biosecurity? And you can use the 4 pillars of NGB to kind of as a checklist. Well, I got negative pigs and semen. Yep, I got a good source of that. I'm pretty good at my truck wash. My people shower in. My supplies come in and are disinfected. And I can mitigate my feed, but I don't have an aerosol filtration program. That's my weak link. Now, can we do something about that? And I make that point because in the NGB incomplete group, which I mentioned was lacking air filtration, there was a much higher level of PRRS infection in that cohort versus the cohort of farms that followed the rules and had all 4 pillars managed properly. Very strong statistical evidence that the disease burden or the PRRS infection level was much significantly lower in the farms that had all the processes in place. So then you start talking, okay, how do we get that done?
Any final thoughts or take-home message, Scott?
Well, this whole set of papers, these 2 papers now, are very close to my heart because several reasons. They've taken everything I've kind of worked on in the last 20 years and put it together in the real world and tested to see if it worked or not. And I was very happy to see the outcomes. The other thing is we wrote these papers up so producers can get them, veterinarians can get them, and not have to pay any access fee. So they're open access. They can get the full paper, they can read it. Everybody can have it. It's not protected information, not copyrighted information. And then thirdly, I think this has got incredible value for other species groups, particularly poultry, particularly dairy, who are fighting with high path avian influenza. This works on other viruses. This will work on high path AI. This works on PED. I think this would work against ASF. Just knowing the routes of transmission of those 3 viruses, we're basically targeting the same thing. So it's got tremendous application beyond the pig farm and beyond PRRS. So that's kind of I think the encouraging thing about this is we know we have the answers, we have the knowledge, we know what we need to do. And when we do this, we're probably going to get extra benefit from other disease preventative opportunities. So that's pretty cool. More bang for your buck, in other words.
Well, thanks for all your hard work with this, Scott. It's a pleasure to catch up, and I look forward to seeing how this continues to evolve.
All right, we'll be in touch. Thank you, Jim.